Welcome to my incredible story of a stormy night. Wait for the end. I never thought I'd fall in love with their stepbrother, but here I am, and I've found an insanely strong desire. Kelvin and Edwin aren't just the boys next door. They're the men under my roof, the forbidden fruit I can't stop craving. Every moment we do, and every moment we are together draws us together. But this is not a fantasy romance. This is real life, where crossing boundaries has consequences that ripple far beyond the bedroom. Is a moment of passion worth destroying everything we have built as a family? I never imagined that my father's wedding would be the beginning of my own personal tragedy. He stood at the altar, beaming with joy as he held hands with his new bride, Lily. I should have been happy for him, even grateful. After years of loneliness following my mother's death, he had found love again. But as I watched Lily's twin sons, Kelvin and Edwin, take their places beside her, I had an uncomfortable feeling in my chest. Our new family seemed seemingly perfect. Still in the honeymoon phase, Dad and Lily couldn't keep their hands off each other. And the boys, they were extremely handsome and charismatic and very warm. And that's exactly where the problem began. Please like the video and subscribe for more stories as we go on. Kelvin caught my eye first. Every time our gazes met at the dinner table, his thoughtful look gave me goosebumps. It was as if he was hiding something from me. Edwin, on the other hand, disarmed me with his easy charm and playful winks. His smile was very sympathetic, and I caught myself looking at his lips as he laughed. I tried to focus on what Dad was telling me about work or Lily's plans for redecorating. My eyes still on Edwin's muscular arm and the muscular body I'd seen from afar as he changed. How could I feel this way about people who were supposed to be my family? Actually, it might have been okay to feel this way. But listen carefully, I'm afraid it was much more than that. For God's sake, they were my stepbrothers and sisters. I should have just chatted with them like normal siblings, or just hung out with them as friends. Instead, I was still mesmerized by their muscular bodies, their green and blue eyes, their charismatic hair. As the weeks went by, family dinners caused these incidents to escalate. I would sit there, pushing food around on my plate, and the stares that would come from accidentally scraping my knees under the table, or from long-lasting stares, became more frequent. The movie was even worse at night. The darkness of the living room provided the perfect setting for stolen glances and accidental touches while simultaneously reaching for the popcorn. The tension was building, and every time our hands or knees brushed against each other, I got goosebumps. For example, when I was picking up the remote and my hand brushed against Kevin's, and we looked at each other for a long time. It didn't take long before I had to face the bitter truth: these feelings were not going away. On the contrary, they kept coming back to me more and more. The more I got to know Kelvin and Edwin, the more I was drawn to them, their quirks, their dreams, their flaws. There had to be something about them that drew me to them. But of course I could have kept these feelings under control. Right, after all, I was an adult, and as much as I was attracted to them, I should have put some boundaries between me and them to avoid bad things in the future. But I never did. Each time I thought of something bigger. Our skin touching each other was no longer brotherly, but what would happen in the end? What started as chance encounters in the hallway soon developed carefully. Let me put it this way, I would bump into Kelvin coming out of the shower, his towel dangling over his hips. Edwin would reach past me to grab something from a high shelf, his chest pressed against my back for a heartbeat. Our family game nights turned into exercises in self-control. I tried to hide the attraction I felt for them when we were on the couch together, watching TV shows and being next to each other. Could it all have been a preparation for foreplay? On the surface, we seemed like a very sweet and cheerful family. Even Dad and Lily would look at us and be thrilled to see their children mixing so well. But there was a storm brewing beneath the surface. What we looked like and what we were inside were so different. Even the most innocent activities became charged with tension. Helping Edwin tie his tie before a family dinner, my fingers trembled against his neck. When I noticed Kelvin during practice, I would find myself mesmerized by the way his muscles flexed, staring into his eyes for a long time. I would purposely put on my best mini skirts and try to sneak my leg up against his while they worked out. I even did it a few times and saw a small smile on their faces. My father was starting to complain about the silent jokes we were always playing on each other. Late at night, I would hear low voices outside my door. Kelvin and Edwin were having quiet arguments that I couldn't quite understand, and I was happy to think they were making it about me. I told myself I could handle it, that I was strong enough to resist temptation. And when our family started planning a beach vacation, how much more could we take? I was excited about what would happen when the sun met the sand and our exposed skin. The beach house in Miami was really beautiful. Wooden houses, beautiful lamps, and so much more. Dad obviously paid a lot of money for it just to make us happy. But the only thing I was not happy about was that it had few rooms and we would have 3-4 people in one room. That was going to make it very difficult. 3 bedrooms for 5 people meant close quarters and very little privacy. I kept myself alert to every sound for this reason, lol. The first morning, I woke up to the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing on the shore. I was surprised to see him heading towards the galley for coffee. Kelvin, shirtless and glistening with sweat, was doing push-ups on the back deck. I froze, forgetting that I had my coffee in my hand, watching the muscles in his back. I was lying there in my bathing suit when he stood up and looked out the window, and obviously not wanting to miss the opportunity, he came over and asked me for coffee. We had coffee together, and I was so impressed. He was obviously attracted to my body. Edwin was very good at surfing, and I wanted to learn how he did it. To teach me, he would position me on the board, adjusting the level of my hips, feel the rhythm of the waves. He would murmur. On vacation, the night was different. We would gather on the beach, bonfires casting shadows on faces. We would chat over a bottle of wine passed from hand to hand. We would huddle together against the ocean breeze, talking about our dreams, our fears, things we had never dared to say out loud before. I hope I didn't miss anything bad back then. I don't remember it now. In beach volleyball, Edwin and Kevin were always dying to be on my team, and I always picked one of them, just to be fair. As I packed the car the next morning, I knew something fundamental had changed. The casual touches, the lingering glances all carried a new weight, a promise of something more. When I returned home, I realized that our carefully constructed family dynamic had irrevocably changed. The beach house may have been our paradise, but we had certainly lost our innocence. When we returned home, we felt as if our house had shrunk. Every room, every corridor was poor compared to the beach house we had visited. The guilt was overwhelming. Every night I lay awake with my mind, a battlefield of conflicting emotions. How could I feel this way about my stepbrothers? Jealousy, an emotion I had rarely experienced before, became a constant companion. I would watch Edwin impress a girl at the grocery store, and my stomach would knot with irrational anger. Or I'd see Kelvin engrossed in a deep conversation with a neighbor, and have to fight the urge to interrupt. The sense of possessiveness I felt for both of them was as confusing as it was intense. I tried to remind myself of the consequences, of the damage we could do to our family if we surrendered, but with each passing day the warnings grew weaker and weaker, and when Kelvin or Edwin was near, I didn't care about anything but the beating of my heart. As the thunder rattled the windows, I couldn't help feeling that the universe was conspiring to push us to the point of no return. We should open some wine, Edwin suggested, his voice husky, for dinner. The look in his eyes told me that we both knew this was a dangerous idea. Then I moved closer to his chest and said quietly, "Yes, dear," and he looked embarrassed. With each sip of wine, our inhibitions diminished like floodgates giving way to a torrent of desire. Conversation flowed more easily, laughter more frequent. The storm was really loud, and by the time we had finished eating, the storm had reached its peak. There was a particularly loud clap of thunder that knocked out the electricity. The lights went out. I was laughing out of my mind, and I remember squeezing Kevin's biceps and making fun of him. We could have done other things later in the dark. "I'll get some candles," I muttered, standing on shaky legs, but as I turned, I felt a hand grasp my wrist. In the darkness, I couldn't tell if it was Kelvin or Edwin. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Wait, a voice whispered, sending shivers down my spine. "Stay." Lightning flashed and illuminated the room for a brief, electric moment. In that flash, I saw a hope in his eyes that excited and terrified me at the same time. If this happened, it would not end well for us. We mustn't. I whispered even as I leaned into the contact. But those words were just an excess. I know, came the muffled reply. I realized it was Edwin's voice. But I can't fight this anymore. In the cold blizzard and darkness, our lips met, and the warmth of his lips warmed me a little in the cold air. It was a desperate kiss, years of pent-up longing poured into a single moment. Suddenly, I felt another pair of hands on my waist, and I panicked Kelvin was pulling me closer. It was wrong, very wrong. They were my stepbrothers, for God's sake, we were family. But with Kelvin's lips on my neck and Edwin's hands roaming over my body, I was too caught up in myself to think about anything else. I surrendered to my feelings and let myself be touched by them. The storm outside was fierce, but it was nothing compared to the storm of desire unleashed inside these walls. We moved as one with our limbs and whispered confessions, and Kelvin began to caress my belly and legs. This was exactly the purpose for which I had put on my miniskirt, and I achieved it. I've wanted this for so long. Kelvin murmured against my skin. We both did, Edwin added, his voice thick with emotion. But when dawn broke and cast its harsh light on our entangled bodies, reality began to crumble. Our illusion of the perfect family shattered like glass, leaving us to face the wreckage of our actions. As I stumbled into the bathroom, desperate to wash away the evidence of our sin, I saw myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, flushed, disheveled, her eyes wide as she realized what she had done. I splashed cold water on my face to clear my head, but deep down I knew that no amount of water could wash away the consequences of this night. We had made our choice, we had crossed that line, and now we had to live with the consequences. The next morning, the storm had passed, and when I woke up, I met Kelvin. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice strange with sleep and regret. I gave a weak nod. I didn't speak. I tried to focus on the mundane pouring cereal, washing dishes, anything to pretend last night hadn't happened. But every movement felt forced, every casual gesture a lie. The weight of our secret was weighing on me now, and we could only guess what we were going through at the end of this. As I stood at the sink, watching the water flow unseen, the enormity of what we had done hit me like a physical blow. This was not a nightmare I could wake up from. We had crossed the line, and would our family find out, or how would we explain it to them? As the morning wore on, a new anxiety began to gnaw at me. Our parents would soon be home. How could we face them with this secret burning inside us? Every time I heard the creak of wood, I thought my parents were coming, and suddenly fear came over me. The sound of the keys in the lock sent a jolt of panic through my body. I looked at Kelvin and Edwin, their faces reflecting the fear I felt inside. How could we face our family with the weight of our sin on us? Dad's booming laughter could be heard throughout the house, followed by Lily's soft giggle. They were in good spirits, completely oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred in their absence. As they rounded the corner and entered the living room, I smiled a fragile, fake smile. "Welcome home," I said, my voice unnaturally high. My father's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something strange in my tone. I swallowed in fear and didn't know what to do. The next few hours were an excruciating exercise in role-playing. We went through the motions of a normal family gathering, helping with the luggage, listening to stories from their travels. But every interaction was tense. Kelvin and Edwin were not doing well either. Edwin's usual ease was gone, replaced by nail-biting and contrived awkwardness. Kelvin lapsed into thoughtful silence, answering questions reluctantly and with one word. Gone was the easy flow of conversation that once characterized our family dinners, replaced by long, uncomfortable pauses. There were moments when the truth was on the tip of my tongue, and I was desperate to escape. One night, while doing the dishes with my father, he turned to me with concern in his eyes. "Is everything okay, honey? You seem different lately." "I'm fine," I lied, the words leaving a bitter taste on my tongue. "I'm just stressed about work." He asked why you always wear mini skirts at home like at work. This time I got angry and said, "What the hell?" I said, and this time my father was really suspicious. When we took our seats, the tension in the room was palpable. Dad's eyes roamed between us, his brow furrowed with worry. Lily's smile was forced, her fingers fiddling with her napkin. Kelvin and Edwin sat still, staring at their plates. I could feel my heart pounding. and I wondered if everyone else could hear it too. "All right, that's enough," my father said, his voice strained with disappointment. "What's going on with you three?" Edwin opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Kelvin's eyes burned with a mixture of shame and defiance. And what about me? I felt the weight of our secret crushing me, making it hard to breathe. I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "We did a terrible thing," I stammered. I couldn't look at Dad or Lily as I spoke. I couldn't bear to see the shock and disappointment I knew would be etched on their faces. When I finally fell silent, the room turned into chaos. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, his words full of disbelief and anger. Lily sat frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Kelvin and Edwin tried to explain, their voices rising to match Dad's, but it only seemed to fuel his anger. Dad pounded the table 3 times hard with his fist. Some food spilled, and he was very disappointed. I watched in horror as our family crumbled before my eyes. Doors slammed, accusations flew, and years of trust were shattered in a matter of minutes. The air was filled with grief and betrayal, each shout and sob another nail in the coffin of our once happy home. Dad and Lily had lost their love for us. We all sat in separate corners of the house. The changes were sudden and painful. My father could not bear to look at me, let alone live under the same roof. With trembling hands, I packed my suitcases, each item a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Kelvin and Edwin moved out too. The house that once held so much warmth and love now stood empty, a silent testament to our betrayal. Redefining our relationships was like navigating a minefield. Family meals, once a cherished tradition, became unbearable ordeals. We would sit around the table, the silence broken only by the scrape of forks against plates. I would catch my father's eyes and see the pain there, the question of what he had done wrong. Lily would try to start a conversation, her forced cheerfulness more painful than the silence. I remember the day Edwin came to my house with a peace offering of my favorite coffee. We sat on my small balcony, the words we needed to say stuck in our throats. In the end, we just sat in silence, but it felt like the smallest step forward. The first Christmas after everything fell apart was a disaster. Kelvin got drunk and started accusing me again. I ran into the bathroom and it was over. All my memories, my life. I felt like we'd never find our way back to each other, and then time would pass and maybe it would be forgotten. As we continue on this journey of healing and growth, I am aware that some wounds may never fully heal. Even though the cracks in our family are slowly mending, the scars of our actions will always remain. As I close this chapter of my life, I want to leave you with this thought. Love, in all its forms, has the power to create and destroy. Choose wisely, because the echoes of your choices will reverberate through the years of your life, touching everything and everyone you hold dear. Years have passed since that fateful night, and the landscape of our family has changed like sand dunes in the desert. We are not the perfect unit we once were, but there is now an authenticity in our interactions that feels more real than anything we had before. Love, in all its forms, has the power to create and destroy. I learned this lesson the hard way, feeling both its intoxicating highs and its devastating lows. As I sit here, contemplating the wreckage of what was once my family, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? The stolen glances, the forbidden touches, the moments of passion that felt like they could set the world on fire. Now, in the cold light of day, I see the true cost of our choices. Have you ever looked at your loved ones and realized how fragile the bonds between you really are? I urge you to examine your own boundaries, to question what family really means to you, because once those boundaries are crossed, there is no going back. The trust we break, the hearts we break, can never be fully repaired. So I beg you, cherish the relationships that you cherish. Protect them fiercely, because they are more precious than any fleeting moment of desire. Ultimately, it is not passion that sustains us, but the enduring love of those who stand by us even in our darkest moments. I love you, and I hope you subscribe and like it, so I can share more stories. Thank you for listening, beautiful person.